Alright, so the gaming industry kinda sucks. I'm just gonna say it. Many companies make terrible decisions when making games, and when they don't succeed, it's the developers who are tasked with helping said terrible decisions materialize that get hit. And what often happens is those developers, the type of hit they take is a shutdown. So today, I'm angry, and we're gonna all get real sad. We're gonna count down the top 10 most controversial studio closures. Now, this isn't like the worst studio closures of all time. I feel like that wouldn't be necessarily fair or even like a cool thing to do to rank people losing their jobs up against each other. But rather, the public outcry that these closures were met, along with like the scenario surrounding them. It's always unfortunate when you hear people losing their jobs and these studios shutting down, and games that they were working on that we could have loved don't end up coming out. But this is more about the circumstances and the reaction. Anyways, let's get into this. Hi guys, MiiKcast here, counting down the top 10 most controversial game studio closures. Now before we get into this, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell and leave a comment, or I'll burn your house down. Back in 2023, it was announced that a brand new AAA open-world Black Panther game was in development. I thought this would have been really cool. I think of any Marvel character yet to get their own game, Black Panther's up there with some of the most potential. He's got a moveset that can translate well into a video game, lore and a story that is always enticing, and Wakanda can translate to a really solid world in the game. But the warning signs were there. It was being published by EA, a company that you'll see later. But they made a brand new studio to make this game called Cliffhanger Games, and it seemed like EA was actually letting them do their thing. If only. Yup, as you can probably piece together, EA canceled this Black Panther game and then shut down Cliffhanger Games before they were even able to release a single game. Keep in mind, they were founded in 2021. Their existence along with the development of the Black Panther game were announced in 2023, and the game got canceled and the studio shut down in 2025. So much for that. You think it's crazy that we got a studio that was formed to make a game and then shut down before they were even able to finish their game? Well, buckle up, cause there's more. Back at 2020's Game Awards, it was announced that a new Perfect Dark game was in development. And that was pretty exciting, seeing how the series was just sort of existing, but not even really. Like, it wasn't really existing. We hadn't gotten a new game in a while. The same can basically be said about all of Rareware's IPs right now, to be fair. So seeing Perfect Dark coming back was exciting, and very interesting that Microsoft formed a brand new studio tasked with bringing Perfect Dark to life in the initiative. Microsoft even touted them as a quadruple A studio. Yeah, that's a great sign. And a great sign it literally was not. After being founded in 2018 and their first project being announced in 2020, it was announced in July of 2025 that Microsoft would be canceling Perfect Dark and shutting down the initiative without even having released a single game. This one is especially frustrating because just a year before being canceled, Microsoft actually showed a trailer for Perfect Dark in their showcase, and it looked really good. Almost too good to be true. And it was revealed that it was a kind of a fake trailer a la Cyberpunk. But either way you put this, what a mess. As much as I love PlayStation, they can really piss me off, and you'll see another example of that later on. But one thing they did in 2021 that pissed off a lot of people was basically dismantling Japan Studio. Japan Studio, as a studio, is pretty different from the other devs on this list, seeing how they were an internal studio division with teams such as Poly's Entertainment, Team Asobi, Team Eco, and Team Gravity. A lot of teams. They sort of represented Sony's experimental side. A lot of what made PlayStation so iconic and beloved before was because of Japan Studio. But after a number of games underperformed, such as The Last Guardian, Gravity Rush, and Gravity Rush 2, among others as well, Sony shut them down in 2021. Sorta. Sony dissolved Japan Studio, restructuring the division and effectively ending one of PlayStation's most creative internal teams, sure. But most of the talent from Japan Studio moved over to Team Asobi, who went on to make Astro Bot, which is absolutely one of my personal favorite games of the entire decade thus far. But either way, this marked the end of an era for PlayStation, and an end that people were not happy about.
36. Very close, but that's not it. Let's go to Gary the Retard. What number between 2 and 4?
7.
You know, it's not every day you see a game company shut down not once, but twice. But that's what happened with Free Radical Design, the devs of the cult classic FPS series, Time Splitters. Now I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible to shut down twice? Well, Free Radical Design were founded in 1999 by former Rareware devs and essentially made a spiritual successor to GoldenEye and Perfect Dark with Time Splitters, which, as I just said, was a cult hit and really evolved the GoldenEye Perfect Dark style of FPS. They later went on to develop Haze, which was not good and kind of like a big mess in and of itself, and really hit them financially. It hit them so hard that they started falling apart, which led to an acquisition by Crytek and rebranding to Crytek UK. After the rebrand, they went on to develop the Crysis games, which were pretty big for the time, but later shut down in 2014 after the underperformance of Homefront. Now, if that was all there was, it's unfortunate, sure, but it sadly doesn't seem too out of the ordinary. Where this gets frustrating is when Embracer Group revived Free Radical with plans to bring back Time Splitters. This sounded too good to be true. So naturally, Embracer Group started facing financial issues themselves after buying, I'll just say, a shit ton of companies, and ended up canceling the new Time Splitters game and shutting down Free Radical after only 2 years. Fuck off.
Okay, Mrs. Puff, what's my final score?
6.
Woo! Monolith Productions. They are best known for the Condemned games, the first 2 Fear games, and the 2 Middle-earth games, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. And it is also worth mentioning that in the Middle-earth games, they established a thing called the Nemesis system. This mechanic generates persistent, unique enemy captains who will remember the actions of the player, whether it be escapes, combat styles, personal vendettas, or who you kill. It was a cool system that made the gameplay experience unique, and instead of letting other companies take a crack at it and build upon it, Warner Brothers decided to patent it and never use it. Fast forward a bit, Monolith has announced a new Wonder Woman game. That in and of itself is exciting, as that's something we haven't really seen before with the titular character, so it was intriguing that Monolith was working on a new Wonder Woman game. But after years of no updates, it was announced that WB were canceling the Wonder Woman game and then shutting down Monolith. And to add insult to injury, WB still owns the patent for the Nemesis system and will continue to own it for another 10 years.
Oh, chills. Literal chills.
It was number 5. Number 5 killed my brother.
Oh my god, I forgot about that part.
Wow, look at that. EA is back. It's probably enough for a top 10 list of studios that EA has shut down. But for now, we'll look at probably the most egregious and really started their villain arc in Visceral Games. Probably best known for making the Tiger Woods PGA games in their early days, to later on being behind Dante's Inferno, and of course, the Dead Space series, which sort of revolutionized the survival horror genre until 3 came out, but we don't need to talk about that. But then after Dead Space finished up, Visceral Games started working on a Star Wars game codenamed Project Ragtag. This had a lot of promise, being a third-person action-adventure Star Wars game with Uncharted's very own Amy Hennig behind it. However, this got a little shaky once Disney bought Lucasfilm, but believe it or not, EA were still set on having Visceral Games make this Star Wars game. But eventually, EA made the decision to cancel Project Ragtag and shut down Visceral Games. This cancellation and shutdown did sort of lead to EA's run with the Star Wars IP, with games such as the Battlefront reboot series and the Jedi series, which kind of speaks for itself, at least the Battlefront side of things. But it's a real shame that during all this, we lost a well-regarded developer in Visceral Games. You know, it's easy to forget now because of how many studio closures we've been getting over the past number of years with all the struggles in the gaming industry right now. When Microsoft shut down Lionhead, that was rough. So rough that in an Xbox documentary years later, the likes of Phil Spencer and other people at Microsoft would go on to express how much they regret that decision. But Lionhead, they were mainly known for the Fable series. They also made a game called Black and White, which people seem to like, but they are mainly known as the Fable developers. After the original Fable trilogy ended, a lot of time went by, but then they started working on a revival for the series for the Xbox One called Fable Legends. It was this big, ambitious multiplayer project set in the world of Fable, and it seemed very interesting. But Even after a playable beta version, Microsoft cancelled Fable Legends and shut down Lionhead, a move that turned out to be a very short-sighted move on Microsoft's part, and as I said, even they went on to express how much they regret this decision. In the Xbox documentary miniseries Power On, The Story of Xbox, Phil Spencer says, and I quote, "You acquire a studio for what they're great at now, and your job is to help them accelerate how they do what they do, not them accelerate what you do." Which is a very good reflective mindset. Let's hope Microsoft sticks with that. Yeah, one entry later, Microsoft did not stick with that. Case in point, Arcane Austin. Arcane as a whole developed the first Dishonored game before splitting it off into two companies, Arcane Lyon and the current subject, Arcane Austin, which they went on to develop 2017's Prey, which was somewhat of a sleeper hit of the year 2017, and then also went on to develop Prey's Mooncrash DLC, which was also pretty well received. But then after that, and after Microsoft acquired Bethesda, for some godforsaken reason, Arcane Austin, a studio whose best projects were single-player story-driven titles, was tasked with developing Redfall, a co-op, open-world looter shooter that turned out to be very bland, lifeless, boring, empty, and unfinished. It almost seemed like a game the developers didn't want to make, which we later learned was actually the case, as it was later revealed that Arcane Austin actually pleaded with Microsoft to cancel the game, but then Microsoft were like, nah, it's fine, we already shipped the game. So naturally, Arcane Austin shut down because of the flop that was Redfall, which is unfortunately par for the course these days. But what makes this situation frustrating is that all could have been avoided if Microsoft just canceled Redfall, or hell, I got an even better idea, let them make a game they wanted to make in the first place.
Pencil do we take again?
Number 2. Take a number 2.
Looks like you took a big number 2.
One thing I didn't mention when Microsoft shut down Arcane Austin, that wasn't the only studio they closed. They also closed, or were going to at least, but I'll get into that later, Tango Gameworks, the team behind The Evil Within, Ghostwire Tokyo, and the relevant subject, Hi-Fi Rush. Now what makes this shutdown more frustrating and the outcry a lot louder is because, well, this was after Hi-Fi Rush came out, and you may have noticed a lot of these shutdowns were because of a game that flopped or a game that got canceled or whatnot. However, Hi-Fi Rush was none of those. First of all, it actually, came out and was also a hit both critically and financially, with sales. So Microsoft's decision to shut down the developer that gave them their biggest hit in a long time, a studio that did everything right, well, let's just say people were not happy about it. This could have been higher, it could have been number 1, but thankfully, Krafton came in clutch and saved Tango Gameworks, so they are really the only studio on this list that actually survived its shutdown, which I understand is a little bit of an oxymoron right there, but it doesn't change the fact that Microsoft still made a very short-sighted decision to shut down a well-regarded studio.
I'm Luigi, number 1.
I wasn't expecting Sony to have the most controversial studio closure. Not that they are a perfect company that has their shit together and does nothing wrong, but I feel like most of their biggest studios that they own were safe from shutdowns. At least studios that, if they were to be shut down, would not create a massive outcry. I mean, we saw Japan Studio, but fast forward, I didn't think anything like that was going to happen. They proved me wrong when they just shut down Blue Point Games. Now, I will admit, this is very recent, which may be why it's number 1. But this one feels the most unbelievable and baffling. Blue Point made a name for themselves by making really solid remakes and remasters. From collections like the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, the Shadow of the Colossus and Eco collection, and Uncharted the Nathan Drake collection, to smaller remasters like Gravity Rush Remastered, to their biggest full-blown remakes like Shadow of the Colossus and Demon's Souls. After the latter was released as a launch title for the PS5, it was announced that Sony was acquiring Blue Point, which felt like a match made in heaven. But this also happened when the greedy suits at PlayStation decided to do a whole live service initiative. And Blue Point were not immune, as they were put on a God of War live service game. Now, there have been conflicting reports about whether or not Bluepoint were forced to make the God of War live service game, or if they decided that themselves. One thing is certain, they had no business making something like that. Eventually, that God of War game got cancelled, and a year later, after reportedly pitching ideas for a year, Sony shut down Bluepoint, in possibly the most baffling and short-sighted studio closure we've seen, at least in some time. And it's not even worth saying that people were pissed. The feeling online, it almost felt like a funeral. Maybe that's a bit excessive, but that really goes to show how inconceivable the concept of Sony shutting down Bluepoint seemed. But it happened, and that's why it comes in at number 1. So yeah, that'll do it for this list. Look, yeah, very unfortunate topic that I was counting down. My goal here wasn't to be like, whoa, this studio shut down, you know. The point of this video was to highlight some of these shutdowns. A lot of them happened within the past few years. I guess, you know, with the rise of, like, the internet and, gaming industry kind of in a bad spot, a lot of these were somewhat recent. But my main point here was to highlight some of these studio closures and also criticize the big old corporations making these decisions. Yeah, what do you guys think? Is there any that I left out? It's kind of weird to ask about that when it comes to people losing their jobs, but there's like, I can maybe do a part 2 to this list. And seeing how things are going in the gaming industry, I think I will need to make a part 2 to this list eventually. But what do you guys think? Anything about the list, let me know down below. Be sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, or I will burn your house down. I forgot what I said at the beginning of the video. I think it was that, but yeah. Bye, guys!